Actor Elliot Page has been trending in the news lately. First, following some hateful tweets by Jordan Peterson, who had not only had, dead named Elliot, but also had criticized the surgeon that had helped Elliot transition. Then you also had, and by the way, hilariously saying that I would rather die than delete the tweet. Funny. Dave Rubin also got suspended, but I think he is back on Twitter now for deleting the tweet where he had also dead named Elliot Page. Again, Elliot Page is a transgender man, and so they were using his previous name, his literal dead name, in a very, very intentionally bad way. So now, on Wednesday, the hosts over at Rising, and there are a number of different hosts now that were having discussions on this, and really what they were talking about is whether or not Twitter, social media platform, should be able to suspend people for using a dead name. So I guess this is a conversation that's being held on the conservative side of, hey, we should be able to dead name people because it used to be their name. Okay. So now, first, I'm going to show you a video here. This is Oleyemi Olurin, who is a progressive host. She is going to take on both Kim Iverson and Robbie Sove. Take a look.
I guess we should not say it because maybe that would violate some policy.
It's a dead name.
That's crazy.
Why is it?
I don't understand.
Why is that any crazier than people change their name? Call me this. Call me this. I prefer to be called.
Right, but to not even be allowed to acknowledge that you used to have a different name.
What do you need to be able to acknowledge that for? How are you suffering? Where's your harm? Where's your passion?
That person lived as a different person for a long time, decades. And so to say that suddenly we all have to pretend like those decades didn't exist and that person wasn't that person for those decades.
You're not forced to pretend that. You just can't.
I understand.
You just can't say it out loud?
No, you can talk.
Right.
Okay, so I love how conservatives think that there's this idea that we're all being forced to pretend that this person never existed. I mean, I got news for you. When you look at it, when you ask a transgender person, that person that you are referencing, the dead name, never really existed in the first place, okay? Again, ask any transgender person, when it comes to that person known as Ellen, that person was never real. That was Elliot's public face that he was forced to wear by society. That's what so many people don't seem to understand about transgender people. For much of their lives, they're forced to hide who they really are. And again, when they do come out, they have to go through an entire annoying, long process to change their name in order to match the person that they have always been. And so, ironically, the people that have to pretend are the people who are transgender in order to fit into a society that is very hostile to them. And so, that said, has it been getting better over the last few years? Sure. However, there's still a lot of work to be done in the regard for fighting for trans rights. But so the core of the argument here, though, that they seem to be having on Rising is, yeah, but should people be, be suspended off Twitter for using a dead name? She's gonna explain why dead naming is not a good thing to do.
It's very simple. This person, there's a trans man now, Elliot Page. That is their name. That is the name that they go by.
I said him and I said Elliot Page.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Their dead name is their dead name. They don't go by that anymore. They find it dehumanizing or diminishing to their personhood to be called that. And that is what it is. It's not uncommon. People change their names all the time, and we use the different names that they go by.
Right, but then if somebody...
The name, the dead name, reflects a person, an identity they do not recognize. They find it psychologically harmful to be seen in that way. They've moved on.
All right, so now it really is pretty simple, okay? The name is not their name. It's super disrespectful to use that name on purpose. Okay? And this is very important to point out because understand that there's a lot of regular people out there who are kind of like afraid of making a mistake. Okay? And they do make mistakes. Sometimes they'll dead name, sometimes they'll misgender on accident, and it does happen. Look, I've had it happen before. And again, a lot of good intentioned people have made that mistake. And it's, again, because it's something different. The human brain has to learn. You've got to adjust accordingly. And then once that is learned, once that's in there, it's in there. So again, if you do it by accident, then of course you shouldn't be banned. That's fine. Or yelled at or chastised. And again, it's not really as big of a deal as some cis people tend to make it out to be, right? Because they think if they slip up once, the entire full force of everyone is going to come down on them. That's simply not the reality. It's just going to be a correction like, hey, please remember my pronouns. Please remember my name and how I identify. Totally fine, right? Now, that said, if you were a bad faith actor, like Jordan Peterson, and you are out there purposely dead naming and misgendering people, then yes, I do believe that there should be some consequences for hate and harassment. Again, Peterson did this on purpose to get banned because that is a cottage industry in the right wing where they revel in their perpetual victimhood of first breaking the rules and then crying that they got punished for breaking the rules. Because back in the day, and remember, this comes from an immense point of privilege where white right-wing men never had to play by the rules and never got punished for breaking the rules. That is starting to change. Not fast enough, but it is starting to change in this country. And unfortunately, of course, the right wing are absolutely crying oppression whenever they're challenged or called out or punished for intentionally breaking those rules. Okay? So now that said, they also banned Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin, of course, dead named Elliot on purpose. So again, that he could get banned and then cry and then try to direct people towards his crappy social media site. These are not good faith actors having an honest discussion and debate. There is no debate about transgender rights. Transgender people deserve rights. Transgender people deserve respect. Simple as that. So now here's the thing. So her co-host, Robbie, I actually do think that he's not a bad faith actor. At least from watching that segment, I think he's wrong about a lot of things, but I don't think he's arguing from an anti-trans standpoint, right? I think he's arguing wrongly from a free speech standpoint. The only thing, again, about his argument that is wrong is that Twitter's a private corporation, meaning the First Amendment, free speech, doesn't actually apply. It doesn't. When you make comments on their platform, you've already signed a terms of service. That terms of service says we can ban you for pretty much anything that we want. If you choose to ignore our rules, then we have the ability to ban you. And that's it. That's it. And so agree with it or not, and you can certainly disagree with it, of course, and we can have a discussion about that and whether or not you should nationalize these platforms so that then the First Amendment can apply. And that's a different related conversation. But right now, as a fact, private corporations, you do not have speech rights on their platforms. That's just a fact. Pointing out those are not a defense of Twitter. It's just simply a statement of reality. And again, if you want to have a conversation about changing that and guaranteeing free speech rights, I'm more than happy to have that conversation because I think that there are benefits to having sort of a public utility of a social media company or a social media service. So now I'm going to go to this next video here of her pushing back against, once again, her co-hosts. Take a look.
continuing to use it and not using the new name just to be, provocative or mean-spirited. Right. I mean, I guess I would use the name the person wants to use now, and I would recognize their gender identity now. I do not think we should be for a public person, for someone who is well known to the people, for sake of clarity or for sake of biography, to acknowledge that they used to have a different name.
You can acknowledge,
seems crazy to me to say that we're not allowed to do that.
But do you see how we sat here and we had this whole discussion? We acknowledged that they used to have a different name. We acknowledged that they had this life before that, but we never called them the name.
Well, no, it's tiptoeing around it because of the rule.
It's that simple. You're not allowed. We had the whole conversation. Yes. What is the problem with that? You're not allowed to call somebody by a name that they don't go by anymore. Big deal.
No, it's not crazy. Allowed.
Now, again, you can have a conversation about someone without the need to dead name them. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, if you want to say Elliot Page was in Juno before he transitioned, there you go. You just explain that person without having to bring up their dead name. It's really, really easy to do once you get into the mindset of actually doing it. Again, it's not difficult. It's not crazy. It really boils down into having respect for another person. And so that's what this conversation ultimately boils down to. It's just making sure you have respect for fellow human beings.